Better?
So far, so good, yeah. So as you were saying, if you don't mind repeating the other part you're saying.
Oh, before we
What
got
you're saying.
disconnected.
Yes.
Before we got disconnected, I was asking you if you ever later on went and asked your mom about some questions like did you ever find out who that guy was that assaulted you? Did you ever question anything later on in life once you were older and really knew what happened to you?
Yeah, so as trauma goes, oftentimes the mind tries to repress it, to push it away. I remember at one point when I was in elementary school, the later half of it, like fourth or fifth grade, starting to look towards, going to middle school. I remember a lot of that ended up being what I used to call an emotional bump. Like I could feel it almost, like physically feel it in my head. It was weird. And every single time in conversation, if I got close to it, I would have now knowing what it is, but not then at that point not knowing what it was, but having anxiety attacks, feeling my heart rate rise, my mind getting like hazy, feeling the need to fight or flight, all of that. Not knowing what that was, but I realized that point in time that like there's something wrong, but I was okay because I couldn't see it. It was in my head, and as long as I stay away from the conversation, I'm fine. It got pretty bad. There's definitely times in conversation I'd be with somebody and talking about things, and then I would mention the emotional bump because usually something in conversation would happen, like I would talk about something and it would remind me almost of something that I went through, hence the emotional bump. I would feel it and I tell them like, oh, well, X, Y, and Z, and I explain the situation. I explain the emotional bump, and they're just like, well, is something happened? And as soon as that happened, it's like it would trigger it's like I was getting immersed in those emotions without the memory. So I would get the feeling of like I'm getting attacked without actually remembering what happened to me. So all the memories started to kind of come in way later in life, as in like my older teens, young adulthood. That's when a lot of it started to really hit me hard, and I would have not only dreams, but I would have moments where I would just stop, and it's like I had like almost like a weird flashback where I'm just there, I'm staring off into space, but I'm just reliving whatever the hell I went through as a child. And it was absolutely terrifying because, at that point in time as a young adult, I was a Marine. So like I'm ready, I'm thinking to myself, I'm some badass, like I can take on whatever. And then boom, I'm just snapped into the past and I'm a child again, and I'm just having these terrible things happen to me. And it really fucked with my head. And when you're in the Marines, no one gives a shit. You know what I mean? Like, there's no one who's going to want to listen to you.
No.
And the type of psychologists they would send you to are guys that talk to people that go and, like, shoot other fuckers for a living. You know what I mean? Like, to them, your problems are nothing.
Yeah.
So, either way. So, I did eventually figure out who that guy was. And I know who it was because his image was seared into my mind. The way that he acted, the way he spoke was seared into my mind forever. So when I finally saw him one day, when I was hearing about like various different conspiracies, and I looked at the Pizzagate thing, and they talked about Tony Podesta. Boom! I looked at his picture. That was the guy.
Amazing.
That was the one who thrust me up against the wall and tried ripping my nuts out of my crotch, physically.
And you were 5? You were 5, right?
What was that?
You were 5 years old?
So when that happened, yes, that was when I was 5 years old, when that assault happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I started figuring out who it was when I was about probably like 19, 20.
Wow.
So, that was, and it was essentially that moment where everything my grandfather told me finally made sense, like in its entirety, including him blaming himself, because in his mind,
You were a target.
Obviously, he couldn't do anything back then. Yeah, like I was pretty much like the after effect.
You were the target. A lot of these systematic people, later on, their grandkids, their children's, they usually are the ones that become the victims, because it's like a free fall for the people who are in those organizations. They have to keep things very tightly knit. So they go right for you guys, and they're probably going to get you in whatever it is that they want you to do. They had probably made you want to go into the Marines. They find a way to keep a hold on you. And I don't know if you've looked at any of the information that me and my husband do, but we research a lot, and we found an algorithm that shows blood sacrifice. It's all in the numbers. It's what the Masons are using, and it's not numerology. It's something else. But it's definite. I mean, we have so many things pinpoint. A lot of things are used. They use the number 13 and the number 62. I don't know if you are familiar about the Atlanta child murders in the 80s, but there was a huge craze in Atlanta, Georgia, where all of these kids were being kidnapped and these kids were being murdered. And my husband's telling me about this because I'm younger than my husband, so I'm learning about all of this stuff. And he's telling me about how we lived in Baltimore, and all of the parents in Baltimore wouldn't let their children go out at the time because they hear about what's going on in Atlanta. So I'm saying, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that kids kept getting kidnapped in Atlanta and nobody did anything? I said, that sounds like the sex trafficking ring. That sounds like that is cooperation. You can't just steal hundreds of children and the parents don't shut the city down. It doesn't make any sense. So a lot of these parents went along with this for payouts, and you find that Atlanta has like one of the wealthiest states for black families. That's kind of like Black Hollywood.
Yeah. So first off, again, so it's still going in and out. I find it interesting. As soon as you start bringing up you and your husband's work, it really sped up and started to kind of crack your voice. So it was really weird because like you were smooth, everything was good, and then suddenly he's like, oh, then talking about my and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, it must be important.
Very.
Because clearly I can't hear it.
Very. But it should be fine on my end. So when I'm done, I'll send you over copies, and then you can hear it for yourself, and you'll hear me perfectly fine because my microphone should be picking me up just fine. So it's okay. Just let me know if you want me to go over anything.
It must be on my end. Yeah, it must be on my end.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I have part of the 5 bars, looks like. So it must be me. Either way, I still have my number on there in case if you want to transition onto a call, or on another day you can call, or I can call, whatever to do more further talks, whatnot. Now, when it comes to the part, just to kind of keep things short, because I know it's getting close to midnight over here.
It's all good.
When it comes to the trafficking and all that other stuff, my grandfather told me pretty much just stories in a way. He never was a part of that, he was just an information runner, someone who worked in the archives in the deep underground military base on the West Coast when they had that built. They actually were still building it on the East Coast by the time he was working in the one in the West. So again, I guess they had the West one built first. And the story on that one, interestingly enough, he said that there's a lot more to the United States, or rather the lands that we possess, that we don't fully understand. And they figured out that essentially there's a lot of underground tunnels that pre-exist us in the United States that we essentially would build into. So the dumbs that we use are actually built in existing tunnels that already existed. I know I'm saying that word a lot, but it's very important for me to get people to understand that he was telling me that there was an ancient civilization, pre-ancient, if you will, that once existed that had that type of technology to just build underground. And that's part of the reason why that these elites are in power, is because in some small way they are related to these types of people. And it's just their way of trying to say they still control the world. And in a way they think that they can somehow survive the coming cataclysm that my grandfather then warned me about when I was very young. He said, one day you're going to be going through what is called the Great Cataclysm. And he called it the Great Cataclysm because it was a series of events that would occur that they realized that the world goes through in a cycle. And from what he was telling me, our understanding of the flood is actually a part of that cycle. Now, he said that he believed it was just for that time, which, interestingly enough, as a Christian, it matches with the Bible. And what he was telling me is in the future cataclysm, he said it was going to happen around, essentially before or after, probably closer to between literally now 29 to 30. I'm going to be turning 30 soon. He said it was going to happen before you were 30. That this series of cataclysmic events were going to happen, starting with a solar magnetic pulse is what he called it. And he showed me the Carrington event. I don't know if you've heard of the Carrington event of the 1800s, late 1800s. So he said that they figured out that if it's going to do that same thing, if they took the records correctly and read through it correctly, that the signal that they themselves produced with he didn't tell me 5G, but he said the cell towers, the frequency that they would produce in these cell towers on the very day that this solar EMP would happen. It didn't matter what happened to the cell towers. These things, the solar EMP would take that signal and wipe it over the world so that everyone is getting the same frequency at the same time. And it was going to last at least over 24 hours. So, from what he told me, this frequency is no different from what I don't know if you've seen the movie Kingsman by Hollywood. They made a movie about some secret organization.
Yeah.
And they discovered that there's a frequency that makes people crazy and kill each other.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much what he described to me. And he didn't describe Kingsman because obviously that was when I was younger, so that was before the movie even came out.
It happened in Rwanda.
He did say it had a way that he could.
It happened in Rwanda.
Sorry, what?
Rwanda. It happened in Rwanda. I'm going to text it to you. You look like we're completely frozen now.
Sorry, I can't hear.
It's all good. You just go on. You just go on.
More.
It's hilarious.
Oh yeah. So they discovered it back in the 70s during their program, and they actually figured out that apparently this signal does not affect Christians or people who have a very deep belief in God, because those types of people, for whatever reason, seem to it'll get you irate. It might make you irritated or angry, but it can't take away your consciousness. People who are in the hippie movement, people who are atheists, agnostics, he said Hindus and Buddhists, all these different types of spiritualists. It didn't matter if you didn't have a set like belief in God. I know it sounds weird, but he said all those people were in a second. The frequency would wipe them of their mind, and they would just be this irate individual or a very complicit slave. It didn't really matter what they wanted. He said that there's two forms of control, types of control. He said there's a one-to-one group, So the one-to-one control, he described to me in a way that you would describe a game to a child. So obviously, when you're playing a game, let's say on a PlayStation, I'm playing a little character inside of a game. Now, I'm not that character, but I'm using that character in that world that character exists. And I'm using that controller to do it. So that controller is your consciousness, or rather, perhaps like your control system inside your consciousness. That little character is physical you in this world. They're able to then pull the controller out of your hands and use that while you're just, I guess, sitting in your subconscious, halfway aware of what's going on. And so that's the one-to-one that he taught me. The one-to-group, as he called it, he said it was no different than having a school of piranha, where essentially one person can control a group of people, but it brings them down to a very base level of intelligence, where you're just almost like a ravenous creature in a way, but you look like a normal human being. It's just you have like the mindset of like a honey badger. You know what I mean? Like you're not fully human at that point, because it takes away that consciousness. And he said that form was more terrifying because, these people are more prone to violence. They're prone to not only like harming people, but eating people. Like this concept of like zombies and everything else, it starts to explain why all these movies and TV shows have come about where they try to show zombies or make people want zombies. I mean, heck, zombie walk is a common thing that started at one point. But I digress. He explained to me that in the future, when this great cataclysm event would happen, they would put the signal out, and it would be before I was turning 30. I turned 30 this March, so hopefully he's wrong. But he did tell me that he knew this because the fact that he works for David Rockefeller. This is the type of information that my grandfather had to take in hand to him. And so that means he has time to kind of flip through the pages and look through things. It's not like he had a camera on him at all times. You know what I mean? So he already knew what they were planning. He knew what they were doing. The idea is that they're going to hide their deep underground military base. That's also why whenever, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a lot of times now where you can look to like real high society. It does not look like them. It does not act like them. You don't see them. And the ones you do see, like the family, I don't know if you've noticed the royal family recently, but there's times it looks like they're just wearing face masks.
They are.
It looks like their head. But if you zoom in close, it is not them at all.
And the eyes. And you see slits in the eyes.
Explain what my grandfather was saying. Yeah, the eyes. The eyes are the biggest. My grandfather said that the eyes are the gateway to the soul. And he meant that literally. He didn't mean that figuratively. He meant that literally. And he was a very picky choosy with his words, unlike myself, unfortunately. He was very, very constructive with the way he spoke and spoke about what he's done. Anyways, he was telling me that after the signal would happen, they're already at this point, the elite are in their deep underground military bases. They're awaiting this signal. Signal goes off. The solar EMP hits, spreads it across the world. So all the highly populated areas you can already imagine are going to be just, freaking hell on earth. Your cars that are electric are not going to work unless you have a vehicle that's like pre-90s. You're going to be stuck. He said, you got to make sure that you prep, and you got to have weapons, you got to have armor. You need to be able to take care of yourself, and if you have children, you need to be able to carry them and run. And he said you need to be away from highly populated areas. You need to not look to try to fight people. You just need to leave. Like, your whole point of existence is to escape to high ground, preferably like mountains and forests, somewhere where you can essentially escape and stay away from the signal as much as possible. And on top of that, though, he said there were other events that happened in sequence. Now, he said that with that being said, when the EMP hits, that solar EMP hits the Earth, it's going to reset our poles. Now, if you look on an actual geographical map of the world, especially when it details the actual magnetism of the poles, if you look very closely, there's almost like weird, I don't want to say line, but like almost like a drag line. Like, you ever taken a stick and drag it through sand or dirt? You know how like it kind of makes a depression and like, you know, crumbles outward? You get to see that almost on those maps. And from what he was telling me is this has happened before. So of course it drifts and then it's reset by the solar EMP because it's a cycle it goes through. So it's going to be reset. It's going to throw the entire world out of balance in the sense that animals are going to be going in different places that they're normally not used to. It's already happening right now. In Florida, where they have alligators just walking in the middle of the street, you know, not something that they would normally do, or other countries in the world where they have animals that like normally just stay in the forests and jungles or whatever, and they now just appearing almost like they are the ones, like we're the ones out of place. They're the ones like doing what they normally do. And he was telling me that when these poles reset, essentially the warmer areas that we understand today, like the Meridian and all those areas around like Florida, the Caribbean, Central South America, I'm just using that as an example. Like those warmer areas of the world are now going to be further up, and possibly towards like in North America.
Yeah.
So essentially the warmer areas are going to be more north, and the colder area is going to be more south.
Yeah, but it's supposed to do it's supposed to like pivot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, pivot. And so after that happens, it's going to cause an earthquake. Now, from what he was telling me, the coastline, like the Ring of Fire, so for the Pacific, you know how it cuts into Alaska and then drifts down into California and pretty much engulfs the entire border of California. He said that California is actually expected to become one of two things: the seafloor or an island. Like it is, he said it's guaranteed it's going to break from the United States. So any areas around that, he said, you better not be on the West Coast whenever that happens, because whenever that does, it's going to ravage everything else around it, as you can imagine. You know, it's going to be able to separate a whole part of the continent. You can imagine what happened to Alaska or where you're at in Mexico. So again, not to, you know, make things a little tense, but kind of put it into perspective a little bit. After that is supposed to be, from he was telling me, there's, I don't remember if it was, I don't think it was supposed to be as big as an asteroid, but it's big. It's a big rock that just kind of flies through space, and he said it was on a cycle. So essentially, it goes in a very large arc in our solar system. And at one point in time, in the past, and it will happen again from what he told me, is it gets so close that if you can imagine the Earth like a ball, it gets so close that it nearly hits us, but it doesn't. But since it's so big, its mass actually causes us to spin faster temporarily. From what he was telling me, he said, imagine the Earth like an orange. If you take the skin of the orange, don't peel it off. Just imagine the inside of the orange, the actual fruit separating from the skin. And essentially the skin is what is actually moving around faster than the core. So this is also why he taught me the phrase, dumbs are pretty dumb. Because what he was telling me was they are basing a lot, the elite are basing a lot of their trust in these deep underground military bases with their ancestors who survived the flood. Because again, I know how the Bible says in the Old Testament that, of course, you know, God wiped away the giants and everything else. But if you look, of course, later on, once they were, you know, they're gifted the lands of where the Canaanites were, they were seen as crickets among giants. You know what I mean? Like, it said it. And it finally started to kind of make sense to me as an adult. Like, all right, so he's literally meaning, like, they're, in their minds, yeah, they're going to survive it, or at least some of them. And they're okay with those odds. But that's why he said it was pretty dumb, is because they put so much faith into it that if you look at the book of Revelations and how it says that they're going to beg for God to cave the mountains in on them, it finally clicked to my head, like, holy shit, they really are going to put themselves in a bad spot because they're that insane. They actually believe that they're going to survive God's wrath, but they can't. They're just going to be crushed in the deep underground military bases. and all that's left is going to be their minions on the earth. That they're essentially going to be just trying to conquer each other in order to survive. Essentially, what my grandfather warned me about was my main worry was to get out of the cities, to get to safety, and to not rejoin whatever countries form. He said that guaranteed, just as anyone else in the world, any kingdom, empire, or anything else that's ever existed, when a king or an emperor is deposed, someone else takes his place every time. And that's what I had to really worry about. So I shouldn't rejoin the United States after this happens, because it's not going to be the United States that we know and understand. It's going to be the United States New World Order. It's going to be the New World Order themselves coming back, using our own people. And a lot of that is he went.
Well, I don't think that their plan is going to work.
Ultimately speaking, he said that it's definitely not going to work. That's for sure.
They messed up.
But the idea that he was explaining to me was this: my grandfather was in his mid-60s, peering towards his 70s. So he's like, I'm already going to die. You know, I'm not going to see anything. You are, and you're my grandson, and I'll be damned if I don't give you a fighting chance. So he gave me a fighting chance by just telling me what's going to happen, what to expect, how to prepare myself. And even though that I forgot a lot of the trauma that happened to me until I re-understood it, but he helped guide me towards the military, which would prepare me mentally, emotionally, and physically for what was going to happen. And now as a CO, I'm kind of blessed by God with being in this profession, because it's allowed me to understand people and how trauma really does affect a lot of people in the United States. Most people that I've met in jail, most of them have childhood trauma. Most of these guys didn't have their parents, or their parents are doing drugs, or their parents are gangbanging.
That's right.
Or whatever else, like most of these people have some very traumatic lives. And just like me, like they don't get the help for it. So 9 times out of 10, I'm going around, instead of like making these guys feel like crap for whatever crimes they've committed, including, and I know this sounds strange, but including pedophiles. I go to these people and I'm like, look, do you really feel like you're either not guilty of this or that you can be better? Prove it. Prove it to God. Don't prove it to me. Don't prove it to the state. Don't prove it to law enforcement, to the judge. Prove it to God. Because ultimately speaking, if you know you're right, then you know you're right. But the only one who knows that you're right, if that is the case, is God. And that's not going to change. Mm-hmm. So I oftentimes bring God to these people in jail. And I'm going to tell you right now, during this whole lockdown COVID crap, the first thing they took away was God. They took away Bible study first and foremost. Most of these people, including the Muslims, had no contact from religious leaders from the outside. So oftentimes I would go around and I would insist that Bibles be put in there, and if Bibles weren't put in there, I would go around to inmates who I knew were leaving and be like, hey man, if you're leaving, can I take your Bible and give it to one of the other guys? Sure. 9 times out of 10, not even 9 times, 10 times out of 10, every single time I've always been like, yeah, I'll leave it in my cell. You can come grab it later. Sure enough, I'll go. Part of my job and duty as a CO is whenever I go into these cells, I have to clean it out after an inmate is released. It's my job and duty to make sure that it does that, so that way I can check to see the cell works still, make sure the lights still work, the toilet, etc., etc. So,
well, I got to tell you, that is, bless you, Christopher, for being that.
Distributed to other people. Get to read. What? Sorry, your voice sped up real quick.
It's okay. So we're gonna have to do the phone call. We're gonna do a phone call. We can do it on another day. I know it's late on your end, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you've got your baby girl you got to get back to. So let's talk back on Twitter. Let's get another date where we can do another call, and I'll try to figure something out in regards to the audio. A lot of my videos go like this because they don't like me talking to people.
That's fine. So I'm off the next 2 days. So tomorrow, let's see, tomorrow was what day? I think my kids go to school Monday. So if you are free the night of Sunday, I can definitely make time for a call.
Perfect. Perfect. Let's do Sunday. Sunday, I'm good. We can still talk on Twitter as usual. And let's finish this up. I'm going to post this video because I know that people are going to want to hear more of your information. And thank you for sharing this because we need to stick together. We need to share and make some awareness as to what exactly is going on because we all have our own personal experiences. So I just want to thank you for sharing yours, and I look forward to following back up with you.
Of course, thank you for hearing me out. If I might add, something that's stuck with me in my mind, not just from the Bible, but from hearing from people like yourself that, they actually want to share this knowledge and make sure that it's passed on. It is the beautiful phrase, it is for the lack of knowledge that my people suffer, that they do perish. And it's really true. Oftentimes, just telling people this stuff, the same thing I tell you, I tell the guys in jail. I tell the girls too. I'm like, hey, this is how it is. Like, you can continue to live the life that you live, but understand that no matter what, the real people you're fighting are not the police. It's not even the government officials. It's the people who puppet them. Because those guys don't care. They all have bosses. And you gotta understand, me as a CO, I got a sergeant above me that I have to appease. And he had it above him. You really want to fight back, learn. And that's what I usually do. Oftentimes it helps a lot of these people progress. They do get better. It does correct their bad behaviors, which is the point of being a correctional officer, which unfortunately in my profession is very lost on most officers. Most of them, it's all stick and no carrot, unfortunately. But thank you very much. God bless, and you have a wonderful night.
You too, Christopher. And next conversation, we're going to dig deep into the prisons because I got hella stories. All right, till next time, Christopher.
I would love to talk more about it.
Yes, can't wait. All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I got to get some rest. I got a long road ahead of me. God bless.
God bless you too.